My name is Samantha Close. I'm an assistant professor of communication at DePaul University, and I'm going to be kind of moderating, leading this discussion to help provide a little bit of organization. But really, just like I was saying before, this is a community chat. We want to gather feedback, gather experiences, hear what's worked for you, what hasn't worked for you, and what you think good things would look like in the future. So please also be in the community discussion text chat. We're all kind of saying hi from our different universities right now, so that'd be lovely to see you on there. And I think the first question that I wanted to get us started with, just looking at the answers to the question of the day that Greg had asked before, is that we were seeing a big discussion about the advantages and disadvantages of the two different main tournament organization systems, right? Swiss and round robin. And so I think that might be a good place for us to start hearing what's worked, what hasn't worked, what suggestions you'd have, what would the perfect thing look like?
So out of curiosity, for context, so round robin Swiss circuit? Are we talking in terms of like us hosting? Are we in terms of the leagues that we're talking about hosting? And just
that might even be a better backup question to ask: is who is organizing? I mean, right now we have a lot of different organizations, right, who are organizing the tournaments, some one-off leagues, some one-off events. I think here we're talking about mostly starting thinking about varsity, and so sort of your main leagues, and then working its way down.
So I'll just kind of kick off the chat if everyone doesn't mind. My name is Callum Fletcher. Hello, from Illinois Wesleyan University. We when we try and do these scheduling and these events, it honestly varies for us game to game, and I think Greg and the guys and girls at UCI are probably a little bit more versed to speak on Smash, so I'll try and stay away from it too much. But for Smash, we do pools into a double elimination bracket. It's a little bit of a longer day, but it's also one of our most popular tournaments. We usually bring in about 160 plus from the entire Midwest region. And then when we look at kind of those console tournaments, PC tournaments, League of Legends, Rocket League, Overwatch, things like that, scale it down. Not only do we have less competitors and less entrants, but we also kind of make it a little bit less. One of the big things for me in Smash is making sure everyone doesn't feel like they're kind of getting O2'd and they actually get playtime, they get more experience. Whereas when we look at Rocket League, Overwatch, and League of Legends and games like that, we try and make it a little bit more competitive. And if you get O2'd, they're longer games, then I feel like you're getting as much playtime as the Smash guys are, and girls are. So when we switch over to when we switch over to those other competitive titles, we just do a strict double elimination bracket with a significantly reduced pool of teams. Thoughts, guys, girls? Anybody else? Good talk?
I guess you solved it all right there. You've just solved it all.
I was gonna. Hello, anybody? No one's gonna follow this.
What I think was good about that is getting an idea about what the goal really is, because in the question of the day, at least, there's a lot of debate about, are we talking about something that's hardcore competitive right away, or are we talking about something that needs to be able to, to give people playtime and to kind of build the leagues up a little bit more. So I love that idea of having playtime as a sufficient playtime as a goal, and then saying, okay, it's going to be different for different games.
Yeah, I think it's really important for everyone in here to kind of define what your program goals are, right? And not only what your program goals are, what your university goals are. If you are a team or an organization that kind of breeds competitiveness, and when you talk about like Maryville University, Columbia College University, Harrisburg, you try to focus on that competitive. But a lot of us are here because we are trying to build gaming communities on campus that are more open, more inclusive, and we want to provide those opportunities because let's be honest, when all of us were in college, we were wishing this was a thing and it wasn't. So figuring out what your core goal and philosophy is as a program should dictate how you run your events, in my opinion.
Well, that would mean that not just running your own events, but what events you sign up for or agree
100%.
to get involved in, right?
Yep. And
Yeah, definitely.
and you're absolutely right. And I think that's, again, I mean, if you have, and not only that, sorry, but what community you have existing on campus, right? If you have zero interest in Rocket League, well, don't go and invest resources and your time and your students' time into running a Rocket League team or a Rocket League tournament that's going to get 3 teams to show up.
Yeah, we just had something like that at Juniata. We got a lot of feedback about people wanting to have a 2K tournament. So that's something that we're hoping to foster as long as everyone is actually able to return to campus. Crossing fingers, hoping that everyone can. But um, if they do, that's something we're going to be able to run because overall, like that seemed to be like the most popular game, just off like the whole student body that they were like, yeah, we like if you guys sponsor that, we'd love to compete in that. So, but like 2K is not for every school. So
Do do you have a local 2K affiliate nearby?
the closest thing that we would have would probably be the 76ers, but like that's like 4 hours from us.
Sure. I know 2K has been affiliating loosely with collegiate programs, so it's 100% worth reaching out to them and seeing if they're interested in sending out some swag and promo stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if anyone isn't looking in the chat, we've had a question coming up to say, all right, are we thinking about events, a one-time thing, a LAN, or are we talking about semester, year-long tournaments and leagues? And I think we're really quite looking at both here. I know at DePaul, part of the troubles that we've run into sometimes are the teams and the students wanting to participate in a lot of matches and a lot of events and seeing their classwork, and other kinds of things suffer from that. So these are kind of intertwined issues.
Yeah, and I think I think with grades and academics, and I certainly don't want to be the only one talking here, so by all means, anyone else is welcome to speak up, and I'll shut the hell up. But I think when it comes to grades and academics, you've got to set those guidelines on day one. But it also comes down to you as an individual, as an employee, trying to maintain some semblance of work-life balance. Our first year as a program was last year, and I really had no clue kind of what that boundary was. And I hate to say it, but we ended up limit testing ourselves, our grades. And but when I say I'm full time at the university. I'm not a student, but our players' grades sucked. We had multiple students kind of start dipping down into probation, and we weren't taking the appropriate steps to ensure their academic success. We were in leagues pretty much 5 days a week, and then we also had practices when we weren't in leagues, and it absolutely sucked for not only the players who wanted to play as much as they could, but also have to focus on their academics and their social lives and girlfriends and boyfriends and things like that. But it also sucked for me having a partner at home where I was working 50, 60 hours a week every single week just because we had matches, and of course those happen at night, so our work schedules don't align, and it just becomes kind of chaotic, jumbled mess. So I think defining it on day one, and to fix that, I guess we should give the solution too. Going forward, we put in stricter academic regulations. Our team GPA is now at 3.11 average, so I'm pretty happy about that. We are much more strict on how we compete. We try to only do 1 to 2 leagues max at a time. And we make sure that they kind of align so that they aren't practicing and competing 5 or 6 days a week. Their weekends are a little more open. Their weekdays are a little more open. And it's the quality of life for not only the students but myself has improved dramatically. So I hate to say it, but like don't limit test your students because they will fail quickly.
Callum, I got a question for you on that topic then. So do you have a lot of players, or do you have any players that are doing crossover games, like they're participating in multiple titles for you? Or is that you're saying that all of your League of Legends guys, they're competing not 5 nights a week probably, but they're practicing 5 nights a week? Or is this across your different titles that you're doing every night stuff?
So Illinois Wesleyan, how we approach our program is nearly 100% of our students are recruited. We only bring in walk-ons in situations where we have those holes to fill. And because we are a very competitive team and a very competitive program, I actually don't allow my students to play multiple titles, just like most athletic
Okay.
coaches wouldn't.
Okay. Well,
So
that was
that
the. I'm
Go ahead.
sorry. Go ahead. That was the
No, you-
comparison I was going to make to you, and
Mhm.
I come from a traditional sports background, and
Sure.
I can tell you that I have similar issues with my grades from time to time with my players, but I'm not asking any more of my esports players than the men's basketball team, than the football team, than the volleyball team. So it's all about, what culture you're going to set. And like you said, day one, set it up and then follow it. And then you should be able to manage it and help them manage it much more
Yep.
effectively.
And I think the big problem with and again, this was a lot of my kind of ignorance when we first started, is your kids are going to be playing after practice hours too. So we have 15 hours of practice a week, and that's in line with our our athletic programs. But all things considered, my kids are probably practicing 40 or 50 hours a week, right? Because they're doing their own time as well. Again, we have our varsity rosters, a grandmaster challenger roster, so these guys put in a lot of free time as well. Um, and so when you look at athletics, like, they might be going to the gym another 10 hours a week, but they're not necessarily practicing 40, 50 hours a week every single week. So for us, it was individually single sport athletes putting in way more time than needed to be. There's a couple questions from UCI. In the case of League of Legends, 1 to 2 leagues, including CLOL, or 1 to 2. So that was on top of CLOL. So we did CLOL. So our first year in one semester, at one point we were doing the Alienware Alienware Game Arena tournament, Collegiate Star League, Upsurge Esports. Um, there was another tournament that I can't remember off the top of my head, and there was, I think it was, I want to say it was 4. There might have been a 5th, but I mean, we were doing at minimum 4 leagues at once, so 4 matches a week plus practices in between those. So I mean, we were burning ourselves out. And going into this year, we had that discussion on day one this year where we kind of said, Ash, it was realistically last year when we had this initial discussion. We said, hey, look, we don't need to be everywhere. We don't need to chase the recognition and the championships in every single league across the United States. Let's just kind of pick and choose our battles. So this year we've actually only done Collegiate Star League, um, and Collegiate League of Legends, and then we've kind of dabbled in side tournaments that fit into our schedule. But the players are involved in just about 100% of those discussions before we even commit. And if they decide that it's too much, we don't do it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing, especially as we're comparing esports and looking at the established structures of the NCAA, right? Is that the NCAA doesn't necessarily work all the time for all of the students, and a lot of the students are doing very different degrees than a lot of the kind of STEAM-oriented students who tend to be in esports are doing.
I want to add, this is Moog from the University of Oklahoma. So I limit my teams to, or my students to a single team only, because there's so much community programming that's going on. And a big component of what we're trying to build is everything on all fronts. And so it's a daunting task, but at the same time, we have GPA requirements down at like 2.6 GPA minimums, 15 hours of obviously requested time for training, VOD review, on top of the gameplay, and then also dedicated time for basically kind of forced, not really forced, but fellowship opportunity to actually build synergy on the team off the field. So we limit that. I had in the first year, we've been 3 years in development now at OU, and in the first year I lost a lot of students, and in the last 2 I haven't lost any, and our average right now is right around 3.0, 2.9 to 3.1 GPA across 9 different teams that we're developing concurrently, just for perspective on another university.
And something that's coming up in the chat here is what might we kind of brainstorm in this conversation as things that we could ask our universities for and say, look, as a collegiate esports community, we've discussed this in the best interest of the students. Any team participating in this league needs to have X or Y. One example that comes to me immediately is priority registration for classes. And I think that would be, is there anything else that you think would help players that universities could provide like that? It's not necessarily, monetary support. Everybody's freaking out right now, but would help with this kind of scheduling and logistics.
I was typing in a response, but can you repeat the end of that question and I'll start the discussion again?
So the end of that question was, I think, when we think about support from universities, we tend to think about scholarships and facilities and things that cost money. And just speaking for DePaul right now, everybody's freaking out about coronavirus and the enrollment issue, and so there's not a lot of money around. But we might be able to more successfully ask for resources that are around logistics, things like even if we're a registered student organization, could our athletes register for classes early? Get that priority registration like athletes do. And I was curious about any other things. I'm seeing Martin from Carleton has some suggestions that might be useful.
Yeah, and I think Martin's kind of on the money too, and I think ultimately it's the responsibility of the varsity director, the head coaches, and honestly, even if you're a student leader, there are things that you can be doing to ensure your students' success. So, first things first, yes, absolutely reach out to your business, or not your business, your registrar's office, and say, hey, look, we're an athletic team. And having that discussion whether or not you are a true athletic team in the university's eyes, but make the case that your students can register for classes early. For us, we've been unfortunate that we have not been able to do that yet, and so I reach out to all my players and say, hey guys, here's the schedule for the season. These are our practice hours. As long as you keep your classes outside of these practice hours, we're in good shape. And sometimes they'll come to me and say, hey, curveball, I have to take this credit, and it's right in the middle of our Wednesday practice, and it's one of those things that we are just going to have to adapt, and we do. But as a organization, as a director, as a coach, as a student leader, talk to your registrar's office, get that approval to register early. If you can't get that registration early, set your schedule before your players register so they have an expectation and they can go into it understanding what their expectations are. And then the follow up is, Martin is dead on the money. We reached out to our academic departments and the chairs and basically said, hey, look, these are our kids. We want to make sure they're successful. What sort of tutoring is available? And Wesleyan is great in that we offer free tutoring for our students. So we have study hall hours that are set in stone, and they have tutors available at those study hall hours. So we have that luxury. So if you don't have those resources, make them. And if you can't make them, find them, in my opinion. And I will also throw out, so the way we do our study halls, again, this was kind of just groomed out of necessity. So we do 5 hours of study hall a week, for students below a certain GPA threshold. And if they're above that GPA threshold, they're excused from study halls as kind of like a, hey, you're keeping up with your shit, you're doing well, you don't need to come into the study hall. After we implemented those study hall, grades went up tremendously. I do have a question for you guys. Do you require your students to do study hall hours no matter their GPA? And how many hours a week do you require?
So I can actually kind of dip in here. Billy Howard from Hawkeye Community College. So since we are a community college, we are sanctioned through the NJCAA to all of our other sports. Our athletic program goes ahead and treats that the exact same, even though we're not sanctioned by them. So we have a 3.0 limit on that. If you are at a 3.0 or above, you are cleared the study tables. But if you are below that, you're going to be expected to attend at least 4 hours every single week. If you do not meet those hours, and we have it checked on every Monday, you are held out of practice and competition until you complete those back hours and then your upcoming hours for the next week. Because, at the community college level, we're very much, we're trying to get kids that are, maybe didn't have the greatest success in high school, and then want to be able to, kind of push up to that next level. And so it's very important for us that we are able to, make sure that they have those success. And then kind of piggybacking on the terms of, outside resources. one of the things that we actually do is we have outside hours outside of regular study hours that we can actually go in. So, like on Sunday evenings, when a majority of our competitions are over, we are actually able to go in outside of when the hours are actually open and do team study tables in there. And we've seen a huge input in grades that way.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else that's not regulated, if you don't mind me saying that? Just we regulated ourselves to the CCIW academic requirements, which is not necessary by any means. It's just kind of we wanted to be in line with our athletic department, even though we're not in our athletic department. So I'd love to hear from some of you guys who are not regulated by NCAA or the NJCAA or the NJCAA. Is that right? None of y'all do study halls? I'm calling bullshit now.
I'll jump in here as I'll help you out. So Rutgers, again, Scott Zachman. I advise Rutgers University as an alumni. Back when I was the competitive director there, we don't have administrative oversight. So we're obviously in a massive program, right? I oversaw 130-ish kids in the whole like ecosystem of the actual esport, like the competitive side of everything. And I found that most teams organically tended to do these things, right? Which was study hours or hanging out at a basketball game or going to the gym together. We didn't really regulate that per se because I think every tournament, like you look at TESPA, you look at CSL, I think they have GPA requirements to get scholarships. And then obviously I had coordinators myself who would kind of check in, do their due diligence if they think somebody's failing, and obviously their coaches. Excuse me, sorry, I'm under the weather. Hopefully not coronavirus, but yeah, I think there's like there's definitely an organic way to get there. If anybody in here doesn't actually have an administrative program, I know a lot of you guys do. But if you're a student leader and you don't have that, a good way to start that is kind of jump starting, just getting out and active as a team together. And like, again, organically, you're going to see a lot of people tend to clump up and kind of enjoy being outside together, right? I think that's kind of a big part, even grades, right? Like, I think there's a definite correlation. I couldn't give you the research or stats on it, but I'm sure there's a correlation between like being active, being outside, and an improvement of grades to a degree, right? Which is, I guess, kind of the end
Mental
goal.
health.
Yeah, exactly. And mental health. Mental health is great, right? Having all of them go and play basketball together was awesome, right? It's takes their mind off of the actual esport that they're playing, Overwatch or League of Legends or something, and gets them moving around as well, which is always a benefit. And there's always, always, always somebody that's in one of the clubs or something else that has some experience at a gym and can kind of herd the the other students and kind of teach them what to do. And that's also a huge thing too. So yeah, that's at least from our standpoint, that's what we've done traditionally.
I love that making use of other resources that are already on campus. Sorry, Louise, who were you?
Nah, go ahead. It's fine.
And so one of them obviously are the gaming centers that people have access to. And so I'm curious how folks handle the scheduling of open hours in your gaming centers and multiple teams and practices with the different leagues, and if you have best practices for that.
So, Louis Laka from RMU. So, one of the biggest things we kind of do is that we have two separate sections. So we have a lot of the community section on the third floor, as you've seen from the events that we have. We have the third floor, and then the basement is reserved for varsity only, where usually our players have set seats, set assignments, they have their set hours to play on those computers. So we kind of like separate the competitive side to the community side so we can focus on both fronts.
Yeah. So Alex Kurtz from Juniata. How we handle our facility in that regard is our varsity facility is a 24/7 access for all the varsity players. They all have access into the facility at basically at any given point. However, we do have different events that we have that campus can get involved. One of the things that we do is RAs and CAs for different buildings can use the facility as like a way to like bond with their halls and everything along those lines. And we also have different open tournaments that they can compete in. But for the most part, we keep our facility varsity only.
Okay, if we have quietness, I'm going to throw a new question into the mix. So, is that what folks have? Mostly, it sounds like the solution is separate facilities or keeping your college-sponsored facility varsity only, which seems a little sad for the other students.
I think it comes down to the program mentality, though, right? I mean, it's entirely. I err on the side of caution when you hear things like that, because obviously you look at programs like Maryville that are massively successful, that are varsity only, their space is varsity only, and they built a new facility that's varsity only. But their mission philosophy is win, 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 right? Whereas a lot of other programs are community based, or whatever, and then there's a hybrid of community based and competitive based, which is what Illinois Wesleyan is. For us, our new facility, so we're opening a 5,500 square foot standalone facility in May, that'll have 55 computers in it for competitive play. And we've designed it as a structure so that our varsity teams will always have the opportunity to practice and compete. Our JV and academy teams will always have a place to practice and compete. But then there's also enough computers in space that our casual community that just wants to come in and just play and hang out with friends also has that opportunity, right? And I don't think I understand that like we're in the 0.01% of resources allocated into a facility. So I think it's a challenge that most programs are going to have to face and are going to have to overcome, because realistically, most esports arenas are like 20 computers. And you're playing with 6 different teams, and you've got a community of students on campus. And you really need to figure out where your goals are and how you can align that into your scheduling. Obviously, your competitive teams need to be able to play and practice. So having those set dedicated hours is an essential must, and I think everyone here knows that. But what happens when you've got 3 teams competing at the same time and you don't have any space?
Yeah, that's the problem that we've run into at Juniata is the fact that, like, well, at the moment, since we're so new, we only have 11 computers in our varsity facility. So, like, our availability to, like, be able to, like, host community events very much revolves around our varsity scheduling, and that's been a definite hurdle that I've had to kind of get over this year. And we've gotten a lot better in the last semester. Like I said, getting those RAs and CAs being able to host events in there, as well as we've started to implement our club smash team to come in and play after the varsity practices are over as well. So slowly but surely, the campus involvement's getting more and more. But it's definitely like tough given that we're such a new program.
It seems like one of the things that might help with this is if we could make the leagues more aware of each other. And so you don't have this issue that people have been talking about where, the finals for LoL and Rocket League are at the same time. And I think that might be something that as universities that have students all competing in the different leagues, we might be able to facilitate.
100% agree. They need to communicate better,
Mhm.
or at all.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think at all.
This situation where CLOL is happening at the same time as CSL, then in between that we're trying to do other tournaments it's kind of hard for everybody. I know like Fletcher is suffering from that too.
Yeah, and I will say that we bit a bullet with this season by competing in both. And again, this kind of goes to that point that we talked about in the beginning, in which we were saying, like, at the end of the day, we learned in our first year that you don't need to be everywhere. You don't need to compete in everything. So it is the university and the facilitator's responsibility to say, hey, this is too much. This is too little. Like where we should be. So like, I don't 100%. I absolutely wholeheartedly agree that organizers, TOs, should communicate way better. And having Collegiate Star League running a month-and-a-half long playoff during Collegiate League of Legends playoffs, the main season that realistically all of us have teams in, is a fucking catastrophe and a stupid decision that should have never been made. But as a facilitator, we also understand that we have the ability to not compete in either of those leagues. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we kind of suffered the same thing when we did our JV team. So we're in upsurge for varsity and JV, and then we also did a Phoenix League for varsity and JV
Mm-hmm.
because we assumed that because for varsity for Phoenix League and upsurge are different days, but for some reason for their JV team they happen exact same days at the exact same time. So if we don't get rescheduled, we have to DQ. It's like the worst situation.
I guess one of the questions that's coming in from the chat from Jason is that the developers might be almost against this kind of coordination, which seems crazy to me as someone who's like, let's grow esports, let's grow all of these communities. But I'm not sure how we could come back to that because the developers obviously have an economic motive, but we have a really different motive at the different schools.
No, one of the biggest problems right now is that like they're trying to control this whole atmosphere without really understanding how it was growing on its own. Right? Obviously, we're going through these bugs where everyone's not really talking with each other, not understanding each other's roles and everything. But as time goes on, this will have solved itself eventually. So for Riot to step in right now seems like really harsh and unnecessary, I would say.
For Riot to step in and like talking, are we talking about suspending leagues here?
Well, they threw out the guidelines update, right? Without really like knowing anything that's happening, I feel. At least in my opinion.
Well,
Yeah.
I do think a lot of that was due to the contract they signed with PlayVS to
Mhm.
exclusively give
Yeah.
them rights to host high school tournaments because a lot of the state high schools right now, like I'm in Iowa, for example, Iowa High School Athletic and Esports Associations are working together to create an Iowa season. Riot, since they signed that contract with PlayVS, they are obviously making money off of it. It's a for-profit thing, so those guidelines were to basically ensure that everyone goes through PlayVS and not through state federations.
And I think this is a really, interesting but also dangerous moment for esports where we're having to make a decision and making a decision as a community about whether we want to step up and say, no, this is a sport. This is an activity that has intrinsic value. It's not just your IP, right? Or letting the developers kind of dictate.
Well, I think that's honestly one of the most dangerous waters in esports is the
Definitely.
fact that it is owned by the IP, right? Like you're not going to see football just turn around to you're not going to see the NFL turn around to the collegiate or collegiate football and say like, hey, you guys can't play football anymore, suck it. But you could see that with esports, and that's scary. I think realistically, we've talked a lot about these issues, and this kind of goes to something I was talking to Duran, the CEO of Collegiate Star League, a week ago, and we were having a discussion with there was somebody else. I can't remember who the other person was. It was Burns from St. Clair, about rescheduling and how it's a conflict and how it's an issue that teams are expected to reschedule or they no show, and that's a large percentage of matches, right? If anyone here has competed in Collegiate Star League, they can tell you that there's teams that just do not show, do not communicate, and it sucks because you're practicing, preparing, and then you wait and you're sitting there, and then you just waste your players 2 hours. But to me, the only answer to that is smaller conferences with stricter communication. And I'm not talking smaller conferences within Collegiate Star League or within Collegiate League of Legends. I'm talking, so as I said earlier, we're part of the CCIW. A CCIW conference with just CCIW schools with a set schedule that comes out a year in advance that says, hey, on Saturday at this time, you're playing. And if you don't make it, you're forfeit. No reschedules, no nothing. This is what it is. As collegiate esports grows and becomes more stable, there needs to be a more accountable infrastructure in place. Otherwise, you are never going to move away from this plague of reschedules and no shows. And I hate to say it because like a lot of us got started in club programs or club teams, but this cannibalizes the entire club community. I get that, but I also think it's one of the things that needs to happen if we're going to truly legitimize varsity sports or varsity esports as a sport.
And I'll dip in with that as well, more on the terms of, the marketability side of things. Like, if we know, for example, that we have a match, like a huge match against like an Ohio State or Wisconsin, we want to be able to promote that, because, that's a huge match for our school. Other schools might just be like, oh, it's another conference match, whatever. But having that type of conversation of saying, hey, we know we have this match coming up, let's get some coverage for it. Because at the end of the day, a lot of students want to have that opportunity that maybe they never had in other sports and other activities. This could be a really good way for us to say, okay, we know that we have this marquee matchup that we're preparing for. It's going to be broadcast on different, across the schools, medias, something like that. And that's something that we should keep in mind as well.
Yeah, I think that the more that we can do to connect the teams to, the other students and the fans, honestly, because that's a big part of what's so exciting about collegiate athletics is not just, the 4 or 5 players on the court at any one particular time, but it's their connection to the rest of the students. And if you don't have a round robin tournament type structure, it's really hard to put that in place.
Mm-hmm. A consistent league with a consistent schedule, and I understand that Collegiate Star League and Collegiate League of Legends and the ECAC Fortnite and ECA, all these leagues have quote unquote consistent schedules, but by enabling reschedules, enabling a very minimal buy-in, at the end of the day, you can compete in Collegiate Star League for $0, right? As a club, you can play and compete against varsity programs. You could have a club of bronze level players going up against national champions Maryville and Collegiate League of Legends. And when the buy-in is so low, there's no accountability, and these issues are going to exist until there is accountability. How do you create accountability? Well, one, by having paid structured varsity programs like the ECAC or NACE or any of these organizations, or two, smaller, tight-knit conferences of partners who are more intimate, like Greater Lakes Conference or the Midwest Esports Conference.
Hi, Mike from RMU, director.
What's up, Mike?
What's up, Fletch? Just to chime in on CSL having the low bar of entry with no entry fee. Remember, though, they did try to do that in the beginning of the season, and they did have to change that. And I believe that is from Riot. Another thing is, too, it's pretty... it seems like we're seeing the negativity on this, but there has been positive movement in terms of more of a varsity front and a divide between varsity and clubs. It's just going to take some time, but I agree with everything that Fletcher has been saying. That eventually, these clubs and these varsity teams, they shouldn't be competing in, say, the same tournament structure, and there should be a higher bar of entry to get in, and either entry fees or maybe skill level. And it's sad to say that some of these clubs will be taken out, but eventually the hope is that these universities will see, hey, we need to actually have a realized program.
That's exactly right.
I think that only good things can come from having the leagues be better skill matched. And I wonder, there's an idea of saying, okay, if you have to have a monetary buy-in from your university, that would be one way to separate the leagues and make smaller conferences. But can we think of any other ways to organize the conferences the same? I was looking at the chat and thinking, what if everyone who has spring break in the same week ends up in the same conference?
What you could do too is take the traditional sports model of divisional structures and do that too, which is based usually upon their recruitment pools, along with the average talent that they get, along with more of their history. And if we were to do that, then we could come up with a Division 1 through 3 structure, and that'll also coordinate with the spring breaks schedules, the amount of talent that's usually into those divisions. And then say if you were to have a really good team out of Division 3 and they're just crushing everybody, they might have the opportunity to eventually become Division 2 after years upon years of success. I think we should incorporate or come up with a model that imitates that to some degree, and we all come together to really facilitate how that would work out and why it should be that way.
And I think a really good example of something that would go along with that is what Overwatch did with TESPA this year. how they had the varsity qualifiers, they had the actual varsity invitational, and then the club qualifiers that run alongside all at the same time. And for it being a first year, they kind of rolled something out like that. I think it was a great success overall. And I think, yes, there are things that can be tweaked with it, but the number of uh, reschedules, no shows that we had based off of that format, we didn't really have any of those. And maybe that was just a unique experience on our end. But in my opinion, I think it worked well.
Just to piggyback off of Billy here, I agree with that. Now, say if you're a club, right, and you're trying to become an actual program, you can take that data, that success, and compile that to prepare notes to show to your administrators on why you should become a program. That's just step one out of several steps.
So one of the questions from the chat a little while back was about this connection between high school esports and collegiate esports. And I know that not all of the people, not everyone's school might do scouting, but what does the scheduling look like in terms of scouting players, and what maybe would be a good idea for scouting high school players to come into some of these more competitive college teams?
I am going to jump in here because we don't do scholarships at Rutgers, obviously. No administration, well, light administration involvement. We have a very unique program, but it's something that I worked on a lot when I was the competitive director, was getting high school kids and middle school kids kind of excited to go to college and participate in esports. So like one of my biggest things was obviously looking at like the schedule for high schools. It runs a lot later into like the summer, right? I think most end in like early June, if I remember correctly. But I ended up getting, and this I will share if anybody's looking to grab this. I ended up doing kind of like an outreach program. So our Call of Duty League was picking up steam in the season 1 of the CCL. And we had a lot of high school kids that like reach out, right? Even Overwatch, when we first started playing Overwatch and we got like flown out for one of the first tournaments, we had like high school kids say, "Hey, do you guys have scholarships? I want to come play Overwatch for you guys." And what we did was, instead of like saying, "Hey, we have we have nothing to give them technically," but working with them to say, "Hey, if you go to Rutgers on your own and you get accepted and all this other stuff, we can obviously work with you. We can put you on a space." The way that I kind of made that like a structure, I guess, was creating this document. It's essentially um, it's a really basic Division 3. Oh my God, let me pull it up. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. I forget the name of it. I haven't looked at it in like a year, unfortunately. But essentially what it does is it says, it's a non-legal binding. It doesn't say, "Hey, we're picking you up to come to this college and play for us directly," but it's essentially like a celebratory signing where you have colleges go down and send a representative to a high school, have them sign it, and kind of create that channel a bit, and work with the high schools themselves to kind of see, because it's good media for everybody. Here it is. I'll throw it right in here. And all it really is just showing that you're willing to work with the high school kids and the high school programs. And again, obviously it's kind of hard to describe like getting those students directly involved. At what we would do would have like scrims, right? We'd have open scrims where we would pick people from our community at Rutgers who are in the Discord who are interested, and have them jump in and play a few games, right? Why not, right? The benefit there is, you get kids involved at the high school level that might be interested in Rutgers and might be thinking about going there anyway, and get them a little bit of exposure early to esports programs.
What RMU ended up doing, we took a crack at it. We posted on Twitter around September of last year about doing a high school tournament. And so a lot of the high school clubs were coming out of the woodwork trying to participate, and we required them to have an administrator. It could be a teacher, it could be IT staff, some faculty member have to sign something because that they're going to be there, and they're also going to be a part of the Discord. this is a step of bringing legitimacy to clubs that aren't a part of, say, IHSEA or other high school esports associations. It gives them the opportunity to show to faculty members that, hey, this exists and universities are doing this. Again, it was our first crack at it. We went for about a month and a half. We think it's a little bit too long. I think we're going to move it down to just a month. But it gives the students something to do that don't have programs. It's a way for them to connect with our actual athletes. It gives them a way to connect with myself, my coaches. It gives them a way to communicate with other programs at other high schools, and then have that faculty member also be in the Discord and maybe ask questions so that, hey, how are you running your program? What are you looking to do? Really, we're facilitating the conversation. And I definitely ask all other universities and junior colleges to do the same thing. The one thing that I keep hearing from high schools are there's not enough tournaments. There's not enough tournaments, but don't give them too much. Like Fletcher said, you don't want them doing everything. We even can't do everything, but let them choose. Let them pick and choose on what they want to do. At the end of the day, it's our job to make sure that we connect with high schools in the way that we can. And if we're lucky enough to connect with that administrator or that faculty member that might not know that much about esports, we can educate them about esports. What I like to say is esports is a tight-knit community, and we like to give information to each other to show growth and to act as one voice. So we should continue to do that and facilitate that.
Yeah, one thing I've definitely found success with at Juniata in terms of getting more high school involvement is holding exhibition matches with different local high school clubs. So recently we had Chambersburg High School, which is about an hour and a half from us. They had their club esports team come up and just play against our varsity program, just as like a simple exhibition match. They came up, they got to hang out with the team, they ate dinner with them, and just like that simple little connection. Like even though it wasn't a big tournament, it also, like, because of that, wasn't a giant involvement, and allows more and more high school clubs to get involved. And we found personally at Juniata, we found a lot of success doing that.
And for people who are looking for support from your administration, at least my experience has been that this is something that gets administrators interested. When you start talking about connection to local high schools and getting your college's name out there, or incentivizing people to go to your school and not another.
Well, and a big reason for that is most administrators are looking at esports as a recruitment tool, period.
Yep. And
Yeah.
and I would strongly encourage all of you to invite your local high schools to your facility for a game night, right? At the end of the day, like the amount of kids that I talk to that don't even know like what they want in a collegiate esports program is astounding. It's astounding. And we talk to kids every day who will go like, "Oh, I'm going to go play Rocket League in school." And we'll go, "Okay, where are you looking at?" And they'll tell me schools that they literally do not have esports arenas. Or they're club teams, and they want to go play competitive. Get those kids in your doors while they're in high school still as freshmen. Give them a facility to look forward to, give them a program to follow, give them a storyline to get excited about, and start onboarding them as freshmen in high school. Start onboarding them before they've even thought about other schools, because at the end of the day, if it's between me and RMU, and I've got a kid that I've been talking to for 4 years, and Mike reaches out now, chances are he's going to come to me over RMU. And as programs that are going to be growing, and sorry for using you there as an example, Mike, but like as you grow your program and as you ask for your school for more resources, you're going to have to sell them the cost analysis of like, hey, we're going to recruit, it's going to be worth the money for us to invest in our program. So start putting the investment into the people that are going to be putting the investment in your program. Have open houses, have high school championships, have high school tournaments. And if you have a facility and you have a lot of open time and a lot of open computers, you could even set up a rental system where you can go to the local high schools and say, hey, we're going to give you access to 10 computers in our esports arena for 3 hours a week, and you're going to pay us $1,000 a semester, and now you're creating more revenue for your program. That's a huge win for your university.
And I'll
give a...
Oh, go ahead, Billy.
Okay, I was going to say, I can give a working example of that, actually. So Cedar Falls High School here in Iowa, they made the playoffs for HSEL, And their captain actually reached out to me on Discord because he had an interest in our program. He's like, hey, we know you guys have done very well in the national scene for Overwatch. Would you guys be interested in scrimming us to help us get ready for the national playoffs? And then obviously I instantly jumped on it. Well, of their 6 starters, 5 of them are seniors. I've officially signed 4 of them to scholarship to come play for me next year because I got them in the door to come practice in our facility. They had a fantastic time. They actually took like 2 or 3 maps off of us, which I was a little impressed with. But it's that type of experience that, hey, we got them in the door. They were able to play against the team that I currently have, and then they were able to then make their decision from there. And like I said, 4 of the 5 are signed to come play here next year, and that's a high school 10 minutes away. You know?
That was me clapping for you. Good fucking job. Good job.
Well, the
Thank
other
you.
opportunities that always seem to get misplaced here is I develop shoutcasters, I develop professional writers and journalism energies. These are all core energies inside of esports as well. And these are all other opportunities that venues like that can help for collaboration. So for instance, OU partners with the state of Oklahoma's first ever K-12 league, and we control all the rights for broadcast for the entire league, allowing my students to also mentor future broadcasters and inspire and also evolve high school AV clubs as another extension of evolution with this.
Yeah, that's a huge thing that's helped us out at Juniata as well as establishing more of an educational connection to our program as well. We have 2 students currently that are earning 4 credits of internship credit for their major through the work that they're doing alongside the esports program. So one's doing videography and the other person's basically acting as a social media director, and they're getting college credit for that. And students have come in and seen that and really had that as like a big selling point for the program as well. So that's definitely something to like if you can find a way to have that develop and flourish, definitely get involved in that side as well.
And part of that can be, I'd encourage people to look at existing student media organizations. You know, if your school has a streaming lab, if your school has a radio channel, those people might be interested in covering you. They might just not know about you.
I mean, that's what RMU ended up doing during my first year here. We took the pre-existing student executive board, made them more official, gave them power, invited them to any of the meetings that I went to in terms of partnerships and sponsorships, meeting with them, having them take notes, having them be in the room. Definitely if it was based on their major or minor. I took a graphic design student and had him come up with designs for our jerseys and our logos. And he currently works for me. And I have an entire student marketing team in which they're working on the Roosevelt University emotes and logos for our upcoming jerseys. The one caveat, though, is they're going to be able to put this on their portfolios. You know, this is something that they'll be able to put in. If I can't pay them, if you can't pay them, right? You want to give them the opportunity of actual experience that they could put down and say, hey, I did this, and hey, I have this representation. So upon graduation, they do this. So my pitch to beat now Fletcher in a hypothetical situation is to say, hey, we've had these students successfully make these jerseys a part of Champion. We've had these students go on and work with Respawn. You know, no other institution does this. We have a track record of this. And then those students that are then alumni that come back and then vouch for you and say how much that your program has assisted them both academically, athletically, and through the career development side.
And I want to build on that. So the whole point of when we started to expand into journalism energy, and not even expand, we actually started that. Competitive energies came as a second tier to our journalistic energies, is that was on the roadmap to start talking about academic curriculum and not just offering some elective courses or a minor and major, but actually an entire pipeline. So we have, universities and that teach sports broadcasting, broadcast journalism. Well, that's just a shoutcaster with a different game. And so these are also, logical tie-ins. But now for a recruitment tool, when we talk about high school, it's not just competitive energies. That's just kind of here's the allure of it. But here's the actual tangible jobs outside of that 1%, 4,500 SR, Genji that you're going to find. You're going to find that shoutcaster. You're going to find that writer, that next persona that's going to get an esports award for writing articles and doing event coverage, or that next person that helps kind of build that infrastructure to tell that story, because telling the story is ultimately what's keeping us all from being further along. There's none of us have gotten, or some of us have, but not everybody, and I'm definitely not one of them, but we have to be better about telling the story, because without visibility, nobody even knows we exist. And sure, they might endorse you at one stage of this or one phase of this, but you have a tournament last weekend, great. 2 days later, 3 days later, in today's attention span cycle, well, you're forgotten already. So that journalistic practicum, influencer type energies, and communications type backbone are, I actually put them higher on the food chain than competitive energies.
I was gonna ask if I was allowed to talk. I don't like have any roles in here, but I would like, I see you guys talking. It's a really interesting conversation that you guys are having here.
Who's talking right now? Absolutely talk.
I just joined. I saw you guys' tweet about it on Twitter, and I joined, and you guys are like having a really good conversation. So I wanted to speak
100%.
on like, yeah, how my school does it. So I go to Rogers State in Claremont, Oklahoma. We have esports varsity scholarships and esport major and minor with scholarships as well. And yeah, I was saying like what we do is we bring in the high schools. We bring them in and we show them like, hey, you can come and you can play competitively and you can, get a scholarship as well. And we also are bringing in like administrative because it's really hard. You have to get through the administration really before you get through the kids. And I guess what one of my like how I'm like convinced them really is how to get in esports and stuff is that I was a athlete all of my life. I actually played at Iowa for 2 years in college, and I got a scholarship, all that, and I was like, it's just as hard as playing a sport. It's if not harder. It's just a different mental capacity that you have to play esports, and I've convinced a lot of them that hey, we need to bring in esports. It's what the kids want, and I also work at the esports arena. If you guys have ever heard of that, they have a few all over, and they're trying to get in every state, but they have one in Oklahoma. I also work there too, and I'm getting through the kids there. Like, hey, come up, to Rogers State. We have scholarships. You can play this, that, and that. And yeah, I think that's really what you have to do is just go through the kids because that's where you're going to get them in the high school and getting them here. And saying that I'm an esports major is also is like, they're like, wow, like, how do you do that? What's it like and stuff? And I'll probably be one of the first that graduate since it's my 4th year and I just picked the major. But yeah, so yeah, that's all I really had to say.
Begin.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I think my internet is lagging here a little bit, but thank you for jumping in. We super want to hear from people from all different perspectives on collegiate esports. So we are coming to the end of our time here, unfortunately. So does anyone have any kind of last questions, or we're looking for more topics to host more of these kind of community discussions? So if there are any things you'd like to hear us talk about and to get people together to say, what are the experiences? What can we talk about? Those suggestions would be appreciated.
So,
God. Bless you.
God bless you.
Bless you.
So one thing that I've been mulling about in my brain, I started helping one of the like I guess it's the first middle school program with esports a year and a half ago, I think. I don't know. I'm sure a lot of you guys are in the esports for EDU hemisphere as well. Chris Aviles, Justin Statter. There's a bunch of guys in New Jersey who are trying to kind of form and mold some sort of state regulation.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we've been kind of mulling around internally, and I guess this is one of the first times externally, is starting to do a program where you have college students come in and coach a middle school or a high school, and to give it credibility and to give it an air of more than just volunteering time or volunteer hours, but actually giving it like a paid opportunity for kids to get coached by college students. And I'm sure some of you guys have also had that idea or thought about it as well. And it's something that I think, we would need obviously a lot of colleges on board with to begin with. But it's something that has been mulling around for a little bit now, and it's something that's definitely possible. I actually spoke with a guy from Rally Video, I guess, recently, that pretty much hosts like an asynchronous video viewing software that you could have. Essentially, what you would have is a middle school or a high school administrator would record gameplay from a practice, send it out to a college student. They would watch the replay and comment, video, text, audio, whatever they got to do, and they would show and then send it back to the administrator at the middle school or high school. Again, it's something that I think it would be good for future discussion, maybe having a discussion about how can we get college kids like more credibility in their experiences. I think obviously it's great. Rutgers Esports has such a cool program, and when I was there, it was pretty much like being involved with. It was like literally being involved with a small business, and that's the piece. And actually, Jess, I actually have heard of Connected Camp, so it would be similar to that, but more local at least. I just think it's a great discussion to have about just or giving an opportunity for college kids to put something major on their resumes for esports.
All right, I think that's a good point for us to end on. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming in. I think this is a super successful first discussion. Just to kind of pimp the resources in the server, check out the resources channel. There are a lot of useful documents and guides there, especially if you're getting started. This has been a recorded session. I realized I should have said this. So just as Greg's saying in the chat right now, the video will be available afterwards, and we're going to be compiling a little write-up together on what everyone was saying and try and pass that on to developers and tournament organizers and other kind of interested parties. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for everybody for
guys.
coming in.
Have a great one, everyone.